Louis Zamperini was able to survive obstacles that most human beings could never imagine. Although he did not know it, Louis was born with and acquired many traits in his lifetime that would help him survive World War II. Louis unknowingly throughout his childhood was being prepared to survive an adventure that many men could not have. Hunger. Louis was born into an Italian family on January 26, 1917, to Anthony and Louise Zamperini. Louis was the Zamperini's second child, with an older brother named Pete and two little sisters, Sylvia and Virginia, born a few years later after Louis. The family moved to Torrance, California shortly after Louis was born. Although Louis' family wasn't dirt poor, they weren't well off. Growing up during the Depression, Louis had to understand what it was like to never be full. Toughness. With Italian immigrant parents and knowing little English, Louis was a target for bullying throughout his childhood. He learned he needed to acquire thick skin at a very young age. Louis attended Torrance High and he was constantly picked on. He figured that if he could not make people accept him, why not cause as much trouble as he could? After his father Anthony taught him how to box, Louis himself became known as a bully. He would hit anyone who dared to poke fun at him. Stamina. Louis' brother Pete made Louis start to run with him. Soon Louis fell in love with the sport. Louis' troublemaking slowed down as much of the time as he was taken up with training. He ran everywhere. During the summer he would run all over Torrance, sometimes twice a day. To expand his lung capacity, he would run to the pool, dive to the bottom and hold his breath. By the end of the summer he could hold his breath for 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Natural ability. After many outstanding performances at the high school level, Louis was given a scholarship to run at the University of Southern California. He quickly became the star of college running, breaking even his brother's records. Although Louis' best event was the 1500-meter run, he was desperate to go to the Olympics in Berlin. Because he had a better chance of making it in the 5,000-meter run, Louis took a risk and decided to train in the 5,000-meter run for the first time in his whole life. After running the race only once, Louis was a few seconds from the fastest 5,000-meter runner in America. Louis was invited to Olympic trials for this event, and Louis' dreams were even bigger. After an amazing run at the Olympic trials, Louis made it to the Olympic Games in Berlin at the age of 19. He was the youngest distance runner ever to make the U.S. running team. Louis had no average human genetics. Determination. After finishing 8th in the Olympic Games, Louis was hungry for the next Olympics. He wanted to bring home a medal. He started training for the 1940 Olympics, which would be held in Finland. Between college and training for the Games, Louis became a very disciplined man that stood in stark contrast to the former neighborhood bully of Torrance. Every day before and after classes, Louis would train harder than he ever trained before. He was determined to make it back to the Olympics. Louis learned that when he set his mind to a goal, nothing could stop him. After Japan started to invade China, and Germany set its sights on Poland, the Olympics were canceled. Louis became desperate after his second lost chance and dropped out of the University of Southern California in the spring. A few weeks later, Louis was sent to basic training and learned that the U.S. Army Corps was going to make him a bombardier. Friendship. As Louis and the other men trained for battle, they all became very good friends. One of the men that Louis bonded with the most was the pilot of the crew, Phil. Soon after meeting Phil, Louis and Phil became inseparable. After training together for weeks, Phil and Louis worked together in perfect harmony. The crew named their plane Superman. The rest of the crew became close friends as well, and it resulted in efficient flying. When the crew got their first taste of battle, it changed everything. No longer were they just running through a drill. They realized now that making a mistake could cost them their lives. Level-headed. After several other missions, the men had their first taste of true fear of death. The Japanese had seized the island of Nauru because it was rich in phosphate. The men's job were to go in and bomb the phosphate works. As Louis dropped the first bomb, something hit the bomber beside them, and as Louis and his crew watched as it began to tailspin to its death, Superman was alone without a wingman. As Louis began dropping more bombs with outstanding precision, Zeros surrounded the Superman. Superman was hit badly with more than 500 bullets. With hundreds of holes, Phil did not think that the Superman could make it back to base. This was not the only problem. The plane's brakes had been severed by bullets. Although landing seemed fatal, Louis remained calm and came up with a quick solution. He quickly tied parachutes to the back of the plane, ready to release them when the plane touched the ground. After 5 long hours of struggle, Phil managed to land the Superman. After landing, the men counted 594 bullet holes on the plane. The crash. Due to the Superman's damage, the crew no longer had a plane. A few days later, the Green Hornet was assigned to Louis' crew. Louis and his crew were ordered to complete a rescue mission in their new plane. Everyone on board became worried about the plane's stability. Soon after taking off, Louis noticed that engines on the left side were burning more fuel than on the opposite side. While trying to fix this, one of the engines started to stutter. It shook violently and eventually turned off. The engine wouldn't start and they were falling at a frightening speed. Eventually, Phil said the words, "Prepare to crash." It all happened very fast and they didn't have time to radio a distress call, so it would be hours before anyone realized that they were missing. The only thing Louis Zamperini remembers thinking during the crash is that no one is going to live through this. When the plane hit the water, his body was catapulted forward and wrapped up in wires from the plane. Stamina. With the plane sinking deeper, Louis was thinking this was the end. Louis hadn't known it, but all those times holding his breath at the bottom of Torrance Community Pool training for running would pay off at this moment. As Louis held his breath, he desperately tried to rid himself of the wires he was entangled in. And something hit Louis on the head, and he passed out. When he awoke, he was inexplicably freed from the wires. Louis swam to the surface, and when his head finally popped above the water, he realized that only himself, Mac, and Phil were left alive. Level-headed. All of the focus and calmness Louis had practiced during the drill emergencies at training helped him stay collected after the crash. Although he wasn't sure how they would make it in the open ocean, Louis knew he had to stay calm if they were ever going to have a chance at survival. He quickly retrieved the 2 rafts from the crash and then tied them together. When he rode over to Phil, he realized he was suffering from a serious head injury. Louis' level head was not fazed by the crash. After he made an assessment of the situation, he started to treat Phil's wounds. Louis looked through the provisions on the raft. He quickly planned out how much of the water and food each man would get to make it last the longest. Hunger. With Phil injured, Louis was put into charge. In the next day or 2, Mac panicked and ate all their chocolate. They had no food afterwards. Louis was familiar with hunger because of his upbringing during the Great Depression and being born into a poor family. However, this did not prepare him fully for the weeks to come. Louis, Phil, and Mac would face starvation and dehydration. Their bodies were deteriorating rapidly. Around the 40th day, they started seeing more birds and hearing planes in the distance. They were nearing land. The morning of the 46th day, they drifted into the embrace of 2 islands, and looking up, they could see Japanese fighter planes zooming around them. Louis and Phil were captured by a Japanese ship and taken back to an island. They were treated fairly on the island, but had no idea what was in store for them when they were transferred elsewhere. The war camps were very different from life on the raft. Toughness. During Louis' stay at one of the POW camps, Louis was introduced to a sadistic prisoner guard, nicknamed the Bird. The Bird, by far, was the worst part of Louis' stay at the POW camps. Immediately, for no known reason, the Bird signaled out Louis. When the Bird got angry, Louis was his punching bag. No matter how hard Louis tried to hide from him, the Bird would always find him. However, no matter how many times the Bird hit him, kicked him, and abused him, Louis never showed a sign of weakness. His thick skin, built from his younger days of being bullied, stayed thick as he stood and took the Bird's countless punishments. Friendship. Luckily, when Louis was at his lowest point in his health, he had met some friends at the camps that sacrificed everything to sneak him food. The POW cook tried to give Louis as much scraps as possible. Without the friendships he made in the prisoner of war camps, Louis wouldn't have starved and lost all hope. At his lowest points, his new friends picked him back up. Natural ability. Time after time, Louis was giving daunting tasks from the Bird and his followers. At one point, they made him hold a wooden pole over his head for as long as possible. If his arms dropped, Japanese officers would hit him with their guns. Most normal human beings in the weak condition they would have been in could hold the pole for no more than 10 minutes. Amazingly, Louis held it without dropping his arms for 37 minutes. This is yet another example of how Louis' genes and natural abilities prepared him to survive these desperate conditions. Determination. Louis and the other prisoners that made it out alive owed their success to the determination not to let the guards destroy their hope. From his days as an Olympic runner, Louis was used to being determined to push himself to his limits. The guards could break Louis' bones, but they could never break his determination. His goal was always in sight. He wanted to see his family again. This goal gave Louis and others inspiration to face every day at the camps. Because of his upbringing in the Depression, Louis knew what it was like to live and have to function with an empty stomach. Louis' stamina from training allowed him to survive the crash. His level head caused him to save two other members of the crew after the crash, Phil and Mac. Being racially discriminated as a child prepared him to be mistreated as a prisoner of war. His ability to make fast friendships gave him hope throughout the time spent at different camps. Although many prisoners died because of the horrible conditions, Louis' natural abilities and genes kept him alive when he was going through the horrifying conditions. Finally, Louis' unbreakable determination, developed by training for the Olympics, brought him through the war. Every trait Louis was born with or learned through his childhood prepared him for later life sufferings. The experiences he went through to earn survival traits were no coincidence. Louis Zamperini was destined to survive. Years after the war, while listening to a sermon given by the young Billy Graham, Louis decided he needed to release all hate and bitterness he felt towards his former prisoner guards and the Japanese. Although the traits Louis had learned from his younger days were vital to get him through the war, Louis learned the most valuable trait of his lifetime that day.